That was the incomparable John Handy doing a song called Hard Work. That last word, work, is a it's a dirty four-letter word in some cultures, but we're going to do something about that here this evening. Welcome to the 8th edition of Uncle Poppy's Country Corner, where real men don't play. We're going to jump right into this. To my immediate left, Cousin Vic, as y'all know by now. And to my immediate right, a man who needs no introduction unless you've been living in a cave somewhere and you got various opinions about him, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm with him till the wheels fall off. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Jason Whitlock. Jason,
what's up, Bobby?
Man, glad to have you sitting up in here with us, man, because we're going to peel this thing like an onion and get it going right now. In other words, it's time to hear a few words from the madman.
Well, you know, Bobby, we are a couple of old school brothers who got most of our information at the barbershop in the corner. And so tonight we're talking life, politics, and sports. That's why we got Jason in here tonight, and we're going to talk about a few other things. Jason wrote an article about the incarceration of black men in America, and I want to go all the way back to when L.A. Unified School District canceled all these athletic programs for the middle school kids and never gave them a choice. And we always wonder, why is there not such a gang problem in the South? And why all of those bad football players coming out of the Southeastern Conference? And I may have said this before. I have a cousin who's been teaching middle school football for 20 years in Birmingham, Alabama. And they have an eight-game schedule every year, and those young kids are playing football and moving on to college. And a lot of them are going to the University of Alabama now, but they're playing some good college football. But the main topic of discussion is, what are we going to do about these young kids to keep them from graduating into prisons? I have done a lot of work in the Los Angeles County jail system as an investigator for the civil grand jury, and I think Jason, Bobby, and I, who've also visited these jails, have had some of the same experiences.
No, you and him ain't been to jail. I've been to jail.
Oh, excuse me. Let me rephrase that. We visited jail.
Right.
As a matter of fact, didn't I visit you once, Bobby? But that's going to be the theme tonight, I'm sure, along with a little bit of sports, because I have a few sports questions for Jason. But, Bobby, let's get it rolling.
Well, first of all, a little background on Jason Whitlock. He got his B.A. degree from Ball State University in 1968. And one of his claims...
No.
That's your address. That's right.
I ain't that old.
You know, I got your Ball State 68.
Yeah,
that's
my
what
number
it
in football, 68.
Yeah, he was an offensive guard. And he's from Indianapolis, Indiana. And one of his distinctions is one of his high school classmate was the number one player taken in the 1990 draft, Jeff George. But he spent 16 years at the Kansas City Star, and in 2008, Jason received an award that was precedent setting. He was the first sports writer to receive the Scripps Howard Foundation's Journalist of the Year award, if I'm correct.
I was their columnist of the year, National Journalism Award for commentary.
Well, it's the same thing. It's an award that they don't hand to you unless you have been extremely gifted, is the word I'll use to best express what he does with a stroke of a pen, but he's too young to remember when we wrote like that. But you put him in front of a keyboard and he can make some words just jump right off the page.
How many sports journalists have ever won this award?
I'm the only one to ever win that award, because it's not for sports writing. It's for commentary of, generally speaking, of greater importance than sports.
Sure.
And I think the article you did for Playboy had a lot to do with that.
It had, well, actually, I got the opportunity to do that story for Playboy because of the award. And that's why they thought I was the perfect person to comment on the African-American experience. And I got to choose the topic that I wanted to cover myself, and I wanted to write about incarceration because I felt like that was our issue. I think, poverty and incarceration kind of go hand in hand But I think in 2007 is when I first started researching and reporting that story. I felt like that was our issue, and we were coming up. Barack Obama's candidacy for president was starting to heat up, and I started the article talking about why aren't we talking about this issue, incarceration of African American men of color, Latino men as well. And then, so I was, and then Michelle Alexander, the great author, professor, she came out in 2010 with a book that really expounded on the topic. But, I was, through my relationship with you and Jim Brown, I was a little bit ahead of the curve.
Well, not only was he ahead of the curve, he was a trailblazer in a very significant way, because I met Jason vicariously through reading some of his material on various platforms, and I reached out to him through his email address, and he got back in touch with me, and we started dialoguing, and then he got back to me and said, "Hey, man, I got an opportunity to do this major piece for Playboy, and can you arrange some interviews in Los Angeles for me?" And he came out here, and he became, at that point, a part of and forevermore, the American family. So if you would, Jason, kind of take us through that experience when you came out here and you began to interface with some of the people in the American program.
Well, I've had a long, respectful admiration of Jim Brown for a number of years, and I think I met Jim for the first time in 1990 or 91. So my first job in Bloomington, Indiana, Jim came to Indiana University to speak, and it's funny, Jim and I butted heads upon first meeting.
I can imagine.
And Jim didn't like the questions I had or something, and he came at me, as Jim will do. He popped me right in my forehead, verbally. But it didn't bother me because, one, I got respect for elders. Jim's personality reminds me of my father, and they can be a little feisty and cranky, and a lot of times when they tap a young person in the forehead, it's really out of respect and love. It's not out of trying to dismiss you. It's trying to figure out what you're made out of. And so, met Jim there, followed up, stayed persistent with Jim, wanted to build a relationship because, again, I feel like Jim is one of the most important, not just athletes, but just one of the most important men of his generation. And anyway, through following up with Jim at About America I Can, I meet you, I meet Rock Johnson, I meet Julian Mendoza.
Yeah.
And so it was just a natural when Playboy, hey, you can write about whatever you want. I wanted to put a spotlight on Jim's America I Can program because, again, the work that they were doing inside of prisons, the work that they were doing in terms of giving men of African-American descent and Latino descent an avenue back into the mainstream of America, I think is very important. It's something I believe in. I see America I Can as like a offshoot of the Nation of Islam. And I see Jim as a non-controversial version of Elijah Muhammad, or just a more mainstream, patriotic, while maintaining your blackness and your dignity. I see Jim in the program as giving men that have lost their way or were never shown a way to transition in adulthood into contributing members of society. And so I wanted to shed a spotlight on that while also telling the story of the state of California, which at that time was being bankrupted by incarceration. It cost a lot of money to incarcerate people. Speaking
of money, I have on the phone now someone that you did a solid for me by mentioning his name when you had Jim in studio. By the way, Jason is the co-host on Fox Sports of a show called Speak for Yourself with Colin Coward. Monday through Friday. And on the phone right now, we have Wendell Stemley, the president of the National Association of Minority Contractors. And welcome, Wendell, back to the show. You did the mating voyage with me. And so welcome back to Uncle Bobby's Country Corner. How you doing today?
All right, how you guys?
Awesome.
We're
Pretty good.
I asked you to call Wendell because Jason has done his part in terms of beginning to embrace some of the, I guess, ancillary aspects of what the American movement is all about. And as you know, you and I have been working together for many years, and we're in the process now as we speak of bringing those two worlds together. The economic development side as it pertains to providing living wage jobs to African Americans that otherwise would be still with their ski mask and that pistol. So if you would, address how you feel about stemming the tide of incarceration by putting people to work.
Okay, well, a livable wage paying job is a antidote to that disease of poverty, because poverty will then drive you to do insane type things. So if we can get trained and get our people working on rebuilding their communities and the infrastructure of America, I think that would lead to livable wage jobs, curing a lot of the ills that we see in some communities.
Well, I want to throw this question to Jason and then have you respond, Wendell, in the time that you have. I know you got to get downtown in San Diego and take care of some other business. We are getting ready to break ground in Chicago through a gentleman who's going to be calling in about another 10 minutes. What are your impressions of what's going on in Chicago right now?
Wow, that's a mouthful. I think when poverty meets fatherlessness and both of those things meet neglect and indifference, which is sometimes worse than neglect and indifference, you're going to have a lot of violence, and you're going to have a lot of young people turning on themselves. And so until we provide some economic opportunities and some men in those communities in a real way to direct those young men in a better direction, you're going to have the kind of chaotic violence we see in Chicago.
So, Wendell, what are some of the platforms, windows of opportunity that you envision being a recipe for fixing some of these problems that we see in Chicago that is actually a microcosm of what's going on in urban America in general?
Well, if the Equal Employment Act would employ people from all communities and all segments of society, there would be more, for say, middle-class folks living in what we call poverty areas would stem the tide of having other options. The process is supposed to work. If you rebuild the airport, and the airport's going to produce billions of dollars worth of revenue, and you have an equal employment base, then that will go into that community that might be indifferent or forgotten, as Jason say, and actually give some value to the folks that live there and earn a living.
So what role would an organization such as the National Association of Minority Contractors play in affecting change in a city like Chicago and other urban areas?
Well, we are the boot on the ground. We hire the worker that actually goes to work with the boot on the ground to actually fulfill the objective of that livable wage job. But it all comes down to vendor, supplier opportunities, subcontractor opportunities, the system then feeds itself down to the working class if it's an inclusive system. If it's not inclusive, or if it's indifferent of the inclusiveness of those communities, then you just have people lost in the abyss.
Wendell, this is Victor. Good evening. How exactly inclusive is that system? Because as of this very 46th, 47th, 48th day of Donald Trump's authoritarian government, he just signed an executive order to restore private prisons back in the United States. So my first question is, how receptive are contractors to receive some of your guys, and is it on a entry level apprentice position, or are they moving right up to the top?
Well, it's usually on an entry-level position, but then some folks, to get them in, you have to bring them in at a journeyman level, because that's the only way they can get sponsored into. You have to understand, if you have a workforce, and the workforce is supposed to be diverse, then you have to take action to diversify the workforce. It just doesn't happen magically. Somebody has to take some action to make sure that zip codes are included, diverse workers are included, diverse vendors and suppliers are included. But if the people managing these mega expansions become complacent or indifferent, and they don't reach out to those communities stay in a state of poverty.
So, Jason, what role does the media play in affecting social and economic change?
Well, I think the media plays a very important role. Journalism plays a very important role in terms of providing the masses the information they need to make sound decisions. I don't think we have that at the moment. I don't think we've had it for a long time. The media has been compromised by corporate interests, and information has been corrupted or silenced, and so we have a lot of bad decisions being made. I think people look around and say, how do we have a reality TV star as president? I think that's a reflection of the information the people have been provided. I don't blame the people. I think a lot of people want to blast the people for this decision. I don't. I blame journalism. I blame the modern American media for putting information in front of the public that made them have no other choice but to make the decision they made. So, the media plays a very important role.
So, Wendell, I know you got to get downtown and take care of some business, but believe me, brother, by the end of this week, I'll be getting with you and Jim, and be keeping Jason informed of the moves that we're getting ready to make starting in Chicago. And matter of fact, I got a guest coming on in a few minutes that'll be able to speak to the conditions and how he's positioned to begin to interface with the kind of people that we can utilize your expertise. So thank you for calling in, my brother, and I'll be getting back to you later in the week.
Okay, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
So, Jason, one of the things I wanted to ask you in this segment is, what is your greatest challenge as a person who basically makes his living in the majority community and the pitfalls of that?
What is my greatest challenge? Man, that's a mouthful. Listen, I think the challenge for someone like me who, since 1990, prided himself on being a journalist, and then 2 years ago made a transition into television, which isn't really about journalism. But at my heart, I'm a journalist. Biggest challenge I face as a journalist is that journalism is not in vogue right now. And that's one of the reasons why I moved into television. It's just because our systems, our institutions don't support journalism at the moment. And hopefully we're going to return to journalism, and it'll support journalism, and I can be a TV person and a journalist. But I mean, the biggest challenge I face is the challenge that all journalists face right now, is that America just doesn't pay for journalism at the moment.
As an offensive lineman, you were trained to be proactively aggressive. Is that where you get your writing style from, and the truth telling that you try to purvey, or just how did you develop your writing style?
My writing style comes strictly from a guy in Chicago. There was a Pulitzer Prize winning columnist, a guy named Mike Royko.
Sure.
I read him as a kid and wanted to emulate his style. He questioned authority. He spoke truth to power. He was a great local columnist in Chicago who built a national following and platform out of Chicago. And so I as a kid, I grew up reading him and just mimicked his style. That's where, in terms of athletics and the role it played, that kind of shapes my point of view and perspective. I think there's two or three things that shape my point of view: growing up in the church, growing up in athletics, and just my parents. My parents were just people that, just never missed a day of work and never missed doing whatever was possible to push me and my brother ahead.
Now, what about your pops and his occupation? What role did growing up around a bar give you that edge that I see not only in your writing but in your persona?
Certainly gave me my sense of humor. My father owned a bar in the inner city of Indianapolis. It was a working class bar for working class people, for people, driven by their common sense and their support of their family. And so it's no matter how high I may climb, because, I'm certainly have been in the 1% community for a while, but my point of view, my perspective, my background is very, very working class, and I'll never abandon that perspective. It's part of the reason why I'm a little bit unpopular in my profession, because my profession is real. Even though people, generally speaking, don't make a lot of money in journalism, it is a profession for the elite because you don't make a lot of money. So who can make that decision to be a journalist? Someone that comes from privilege. And they have a very privileged, elite perspective. And if you look at the way the media is now, the media is basically the first line of defense for the elite. And, my mentality is I want to be the first line of defense for the people at the street level, at the working class level, at the, I'm trying to speak for the people that don't have a voice.
Well, along the way, Jason, there has been a disconnect with a segment of the, I won't call it the Negro community, because it reminds me of a Negro mentality when people will formulate an opinion about somebody they don't really know. And how do you deal with that and still maintain that commitment that you just spoke of right now?
Because, again, I know exactly who I am. I was raised by two very supportive parents, and I just know who I am. So some stranger, some person over Twitter, some bourgeois Negro that's trying to perp like they black can't knock me off my foundation. And so, no one can question my blackness. The people that do probably need to look in the mirror and worry about their blackness and their commitment to a black agenda or speaking for people from a working class or poor background. But again, man, I got so much family support as a kid and as an adult. I know who my friends are. I know how I was raised. I know the people that I help and have helped me. And so, I can't worry about what people who who don't know me what they think or what they've been led to believe. It just doesn't move me.
Well, that's one of the kinships that you, I guess, organically formed with Jim without ever having that discussion, because based on what you just said, you don't want me doing what I do. I get into firefights with these folks every day about calling folks certain names that I don't,
Right.
They ain't got a right to say that because they ain't got no skin in the game, in my estimation. And Jim is basically of the same opinion that you are, Bobby. Quit bothering with that. I'm bothered by it because the narrative is influenced by the redundancy of something, and then it takes on a life of its own to our detriment as a people. When you start attacking folks that have made major contributions such as you have that I know about.
But Bob, I'm just going to keep it 100 with you. Why would I whine and cry about that if you've been raised in the church and you understand how Jesus was treated? I have not done nearly what Jesus has done. Yeah. And so Jesus got attacked viciously. Mm-hmm. And eventually crucified. Mm-hmm. And so
trying to help people.
Yeah, and so he did much, much more than me and got attacked. And so my life isn't that bad. And so some people over Twitter, or again, people that don't know me, or people using my name to elevate themselves, my life's too good to and I just don't have the energy or time. It's a waste of your energy and time try to even engage with those people. If you really understand the path of black people and how connected our journey is, it's a biblical tale. And it's a biblical tale that may end in tragedy, because I see us moving away from spirituality and our spiritual base. And one day, 2,000 years from now, they'll be telling the story of African Americans, and it'll be this miracle. Man, they overcame slavery and Jim Crow and all. I mean, you wouldn't believe the tragedies they overcame.
Immigration.
And then one day, in about 2002, 2003, they just slowly started convincing black people to turn away from their spiritual base. And they basically disappeared from America after that. Mm. And it took about 30 years, 40 years, but eventually they disappeared from America. This is this wonderful 200-300-year journey that just ended when they turned away from their spiritual base. That's what I see, because the conversation we were having about Wendell Stemley and some of the, because providing people a job in Chicago is a good thing. But if we don't return a spiritual base to these people, an intellectual base, this is what I love about America I Can, is it's about awakening the mind to man's true power and man's true ability to heal himself, reform himself, and become a lion in this jungle that we call Earth. Mm. And once your mind is awakened, because again, America I Can is not a spiritual organization, but once your mind is awakened, you'll turn to spirituality, because it's the only thing that really makes sense. Mm. And so, again, that's why I say I love America I Can, because it's about awakening the mind. And again, once the mind is awakened, you'll figure some things out, and you won't be throwing stones at the very people that's trying to help you. You'll be looking in the mirror and figuring out what you can do so you can be the change you want to see. Okay.
I've just been informed by the poetess, and I got to give that sister much love, man, because she's working with a brother, And again, this is an example of recycling black dollars, because the brother that owns this building worked with her as she's working with me, and she put everything she got into this studio. And it's a beautiful studio, and we're going to build here. With that being said, on the phone, calling from the southern side of Chicago is my brother from another mother. Welcome to Uncle Bobby's Country Corner, Philip Laury.
Hey, what's up, Bobby? How you doing, bro?
Man, you ain't Barry White, man. Take some of that bass out your voice, man.
This how I sound. I got the very white thing going on.
Yes, you do. Well, first of all, on the mics to my left and right is my cousin Vic on the left,
Okay.
and on the
Hey,
right
man, how you doing?
is Jason Whitlock.
Nice to meet you,
Jason
brother.
Whitlock. Okay, how you doing, brother?
Great.
We were just talking about your hometown, man. If you would, please, tell us a little bit about Philip Laury.
Well, I'm just a regular brother. You know,
That don't start
Yeah.
lying now, man. Come on, we ain't got time for that, man.
Well, let me see. I got caught up in some stuff when I was young, you know. I came through it, you know. I got involved with the American program, and I guess that was around 1993, 1994. And ever since then, I've been working to cut down violence in the city of Chicago. So, trying to put it back, you know.
So you have a history of entrepreneurism, and before we go there, I think if you don't mind explaining why you never dealt drugs, could you explain, in the midst of all of the chaos and the pursuit of the mighty dollar, you didn't follow that path? Why?
Well, that wasn't a part of basically what we did, you know. We didn't have respect for drug dealers like that. You know, we were brought up to, like, we didn't honor them cats. That wasn't a route that we followed. You know what I mean? It was like those people were like feeding on the community like parasites, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And they was hurting our people. You know, I don't want to see my brothers and sisters shooting dope and smoke cocaine and all that stuff. That's not, you know, that's not a good look. That's not a good look.
With that being
So we
said,
never got involved in that.
with that being said, where are you at now in terms of being positioned to help affect social and economic change in the city of Chicago? Because it don't seem like nobody has a clue that's in positions of high profile right now.
Well, we've been, like I say, since like about 1993. We've had a community group, and we work with families, at-risk youth, brothers coming home from being incarcerated, and we try to follow the children from a very young age and keep them out of the streets and head toward education. You know what I mean? So they're not having babies at 15, 16, and they're in a position where they don't have to try to work at McDonald's the rest of their life, you know?
So how important is it to advance the initiative that we're engaged in right now with the American program, the National Association of Minority Contractors, and family members like Jason Whitlock and Victor Leslie?
Say that again. I didn't catch all
I said, how important is it that you now have realigned yourself with the American program, the National Association of Minority Contractors, and brothers like Jason Whitlock and my cousin here, Vic Leslie, man, who down with what we're getting ready to do in the city of Chicago? How important is that to trying to just stem the tide of violence and stabilize communities?
Right, because the violence here is not about gangs. You know, it's basically a socio-economic problem. You know, we've been economically depressed for 30 years on a consistent basis. And we have to be able to have access to money in our community, you know, because they've codified you know, let me say this to you, brother.
Yeah,
okay.
Just like we talk on the phone.
Right, yeah. For example, I said this to you before. In 2009, when they had the stimulus package,
Mm-hmm.
$1 billion was earmarked to Chicago. All right. In the city code, it says minorities are supposed to receive 25% of all contracts to come into the city, and 5% are supposed to go to women's businesses. So that's supposedly what, $300 million out of $1 billion?
Mm-hmm.
You think we saw any of that?
Mm.
You know?
Well, that's where we're gonna start. We're gonna start following the money, and I got to go to break, man, and bring on my next guest. But you can rest assured, brother, you've not heard the last from Ernest T. Bass.
No doubt about it, brother. No doubt about it. I appreciate it. Nice talking to you, brother. Wilcox, and your cousin is?
Victor Leslie, yeah, Cousin Vic.
Oh, okay, all right, Vic. Nice talking to you, too, brother.
Yeah, man, I'm a former Chicago resident, man. Good luck. We hope to see you sometime.
Oh, okay. Make sure you come in and check in with me.
All right.
You know how we're going to end this, man, me and you.
Yes, sir. Me and you, brother.
All right, then, man. Thank you for calling in, Brother Philip.
Yes, sir.
We're going to take a very, very brief pause, and when we come back, the voice that will join this conversation is the rock for me and so many other people. And I'm talking about thousands of lives changed in his journey. The great Jim Brown will be in on the other side of this break. We'll be right back. If you hear any noise, it's Cousin Vic, Jason Whitlock, and the great Jim Brown. Jim.
Hey, Bobby, how are you?
Man, if I was doing any better, I had to take something for it.
Well, you better give some of it here.
Man, we got an American family member in here to my immediate right, man. Say hello to the big fella, Jason.
Jim, how are you? It's good to hear your voice.
It's good to hear you, Jason. How you doing?
Oh, not as good as you, man. You sound younger on the phone for some reason. You sound like you're about 55 again.
Well, I'm 81, and that seems kind of young to me.
Yes, sir. Hey, we just got off the phone with Brother Philip in Chicago, man, and we've been talking about incarceration, the responsibility of self-determination, and affecting change one city at a time. And as you well know, Jason came into the family, man, back in 2007 when he did that article for Playboy about incarceration. And I want you to just give me your impression of how important it is to have an ally in the media like Jason Whitlock.
Well, it's fantastically important. Today seems to be media day, this time of the time that we're living in. And you have a thing called social media. And it's so typical and difficult, I don't know what it really is. The media sometimes rule the world because they can let it out anywhere they want to. Okay? So I'm with Jason. He's a good man. He's fair. And you do have good people in all mediums.
So, Jim, a couple of weeks ago at the Pan-African Film Festival, they debuted a film by Aurora Ferlin that was executively produced by your wife, Monique Brown. And I just want your impressions of being able to sit in that studio, the film theater, and watch the work that you put in for the last 30 years, man. What were you thinking about as you sat there and watched that film?
Well, I was very proud of Aurora and Monique, my wife. They have really done something that's really great. They told a story. I don't think too many people would know that story unless they see the film. And it was great that I didn't have to be the guy that started it all or did it all. I just sit there and watched and enjoyed it. It brought back a lot of memories. And then when the film was over, there were so many of the young men that had participated with me over the years, and they were all doing really well. And I was so happy because they're not in jail, they're not selling drugs, and they seem to be really happy. And it made me feel that we did something in those days to impress them, to make them become the kind of citizens that they are today. So it was really a win-win situation for me in every way.
So once again, the name of the film is Jim Brown's American Dream. And if I got anything to do with it, it's going to be coming through a theater near you in the very near future. Earlier today, Jim, I sat in on a circle over in South Los Angeles that was facilitated by Rock Johnson. How did that happen that you were able to assemble that many preachers and have them sit in a circle and actually listen instead of talking?
Well, I tell you, we just reached out. And it really came to me about 6 months ago that that's a very powerful part of our society, but they really don't participate in certain areas where they would have tremendous influence. And when I reached out, they responded tremendously. And so we're going to try to get every minister across this country to stand up and help our young people and help our communities other than just what they do in church.
Now, while you've done, well, this is the latest push, how are things coming with getting the athletes of the modern era more involved in social consciousness and affecting social and economic change?
Well, if you looked at the ESPYs, you saw that a lot of the young men were standing up. Serena Williams stood up, and they were all really talking about, standing up. And it's 50 years later, and it was encouraging in one way, but it was also, it's about time that they really understood that they have tremendous influence that God gave them. They have a lot of money, and they are mostly of African American descent, and they can come together and be like-minded and have a tremendous effect upon these young African American kids who need fathers and who need guidance. But they have to understand how to work collectively, work with others, and become a unit, a powerful unit, not just individuals doing charity work. And I always say to them, there's two things. There's charity and there's change. Charity is wonderful, it's beautiful, it's helpful. When people need a meal, you give it to them. They need a place to stay, you do that. But change is what we have to get involved in and make policy and help make policy for our country. So our country is not only a great American continent for white males, but a great country for all women and African Americans, poor people, the homeless. We have to really reach out. And the athletes of today, they make tremendous amount of money, and they are very articulate. And if they come together, as I'm trying to bring these ministers together, we'll have a tremendous coalition out there. And, the jobs that you talk about and the jobs that construction companies talk about, all of these jobs are available. We have to just get these young people job ready and get them involved in making a living for themselves.
Oh, man. I'm going to defer to my cousin Vic's got a question first, but I want to throw the mic to my special guest, Jason. You got any comments or questions for Jim?
No, listen, sometimes you got one mouth, 2 ears, 2 eyes. Sometimes it's better to do 4 times as much observing. So when Jim's talking, I like to listen and just eat.
Enjoy. Yeah.
Hey, Jim, this is Victor. Good evening, my man.
How are you?
Pretty good, sir. Those who stood up at the ESPYs, have they made contact with you yet?
Well, indirectly they have. I have no problem if I want to get with them, but with me it's always a matter of timing. See, LeBron is very important. He's with the Cavaliers. The Cavaliers have been in contact with me.
Sure.
In fact, they presented me with a plaque not too long ago.
Okay.
So to deal with a movement, you have to have an understanding that you're in a chess game, and you have to be careful when you move. You don't want to waste any power. You don't want to waste anybody's time. You want to go to these young men when it's time to go to them and really get them to be effective as a unit. So I have no doubt that when I call upon most of them that they will respond. So their eyes are open. They're trying to learn, and some of them are a little advanced, more than others. Ray Lewis is not playing anymore, but Ray is really on top of things. Curtis
Sure.
Martin is on top of things. So you have modern-day athletes that are really on top of it, but the majority of them have a lot of homework to do. They have to look at history. They have to understand slavery. They have to understand a process and how to truly work as a unit so that that unit is powerful and the power can bring about the kind of change that we're advocating for.
Sure. Jim, another question. In watching the film about the American Foundation and your dream, you appear to have a very, very wonderful relationship with Ronnie Barron. Could you talk about that and talk to us? Because I'm like Bobby. I think the film needs to be seen by everybody because there's as far as I'm concerned, there's a lot of misconceptions about you, what you do, why you do it, and nobody, you know how we do. We point fingers at people without even knowing the people we pointing fingers at. So,
well,
but
we don't worry about them.
I know.
Because, you know, one of the first things you have to do is understand that visionaries are usually ahead of the crowd. And a visionary has to be tough-skinned. He has to pursue what he envisions, and he has to understand that the masses are going to catch up at a particular time. But if you lay the foundation properly, when they catch up, everything will be sitting there right for them to utilize and be a part of the overall movement. So I look at my involvement as God gave me certain things to utilize, and He gave all of us certain things to utilize. And we should utilize them. Some of us have a little more of a gift than others, and it doesn't matter, because if you just be a decent person and treat other human beings decently, that's not a bad way to go.
So, Jim, when we look at tax dollars and the use of tax dollars, how important is it for us to become more sophisticated about not asking for nothing, but demanding the proper utilization of our tax dollars to affect social and economic change in America?
Well, Bobby, you listen very well. I'm going to send a message to America right now. This is my message to all human beings that are adults, that are citizens of this country, and that pay their taxes. When you pay your taxes and you are a citizen and you are law-abiding, you are buying your equality. You are paying for the seat that you occupy in this free country. Therefore, when you pay your taxes, you are a citizen in good standing. You demand your rights. You don't beg, you don't kneel, you don't march, you don't sing. You demand your rights. There's no counteraction to that, but you can't get into the emotions. You can't get into all these other issues about being loved. You can't start talking about integration. Integration has nothing to do with it. Your freedom and your participant as an American citizen in good standing, because those tax dollars, you can't define them. You can't say where they go. So we all become citizens of this country, and one of the things about being a citizen is paying your taxes, because the country cannot operate without those tax dollars. So if you keep it on that level, there's no counter-argument to it. You don't cry the blues, you don't become a victim, you don't talk about slavery, none of those things. But if they ever want to really, deal with you, then take them to slavery and deal with miscegenation and deal with all of the horrors and all of those things that we had to go through to reach a part of being a citizen, become a partial citizen. But if we reach out as one voice and just say, hey man, I'm an American citizen, I pay my taxes, and I want my damn rights.
Well, I had Wendell Stemley, the president of the National Association of Minority Contractors, on at the top of the show, and we are using that mantra that you just so eloquently articulated to the audience listening to this show right now. And we're going to be getting with you, Jim, before the end of the week to be able to exercise those inalienable rights that we do possess if we have the guts and the tenacity and the persistence to utilize our sovereignty in this joint.
Well, Bobby, thank you for bringing Wendell up, because he's doing a tremendous job. And just let me just say this, jobs are so important. And I'm so happy that the president understands that, and a lot of other people like you, Bobby, that have always been talking about that. So I just didn't want to leave your your radio cast without saying jobs for our citizens become highly important. A lot of corporations are starting to take notice and creating the opportunity for that. So that's my adios.
Any parting words for Jim?
Jim, it's good to hear your voice. Glad that you're still out here fighting for us. You know, it's just been an honor to be your friend.
Well, stay as intelligent as you are. And right that way.
Man, every day's a school day when I get to hear you put it down, Jim. And I tell you, man, it never gets old. I never get anything but inspired by your walk, man. And we get ready to jump it off.
Well, Bob, it takes one to know one.
Well, coming from you, Jim, then that make me back away from the microphone, bro.
That's the way I look at it. So you guys have a great day.
All right, man. Love you, Jim. Take care, bro.
Adios. Bye-bye.
All right. Whew, man. I'm telling you, man, it's been so many times. I remember the first time you told me you went up to Jim's, and until you sit in that man's living room, you have not been to school, because he is a living institution.
No doubt.
And you've seen the film. I sent it to you. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it yet.
I have not.
But you've lived a portion of it. What you've experienced with him, they captured that in film in terms of his interaction with people from all walks of life.
No, I think Jim is walking the walk that he has talked. He has sacrificed so much adulation because there are easier, more profitable roads to blaze. If Jim wanted to be the richest athlete of all time, he could have done that.
He had Ali potential.
Yeah, he could have done all that. But Jim chose a path that was about more than just gratifying Jim. And, I wish more athletes understood that. Being a global icon is nice. Being someone that helped your people is better.
Well, before I close the show, and I hope you'll come back sometimes again. If not, come back with Skype if you can't fight that traffic, man. And I'm glad you was able to leave your pistol in the car. But anyway.
He was just talking about how spiritual he was.
Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition.
Look. God made it rain and took everybody out.
Yeah, that's real.
There is the Old Testament too now.
Yeah,
but
he was not a good man.
I want you to know, Jason, you are a proponent of Michael Jordan, and I'm from the other era. Okay, and I had Robert James on the phone last week out of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where I'm from.
Well,
and I know how you feel about Neon Dion, but I'm telling you right now, Neon Dion played one way. Robert James ran a 4.240 for real, and he could run backwards 20 yards faster than most people could forward. But more importantly, he was known for hunting and covering. So, generationally speaking, as a journalist, I want you to know you cover your generation. I'm going to speak up for mine. Robert James was a better all-around cornerback than Deion Sanders. I want you to know that.
He's been
noted, not accepted. It's noted. I'll do the homework.
Jason, Bobby's been waiting 2 weeks to say that to you. He's been practicing, man.
Good for Bob.
We have some amazing conversations because the one thing I respect about Jason is he's always going to do his homework, and whether I agree with him or not, I have to respect his opinion. And here's an example. I remember when there was a rash of shootings of African-American males. And if you would recount what you told me over the phone about how that really goes down,
Jason. I'm going to have to do it quick, but look, there is no money in police brutality. And this is where people have it completely ass backwards. This is a capitalistic society. If it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. When you brutalize and kill a black man, Latino man, white man, whatever, that costs the government money. They have to settle with the family.
Sure.
And so the money is in incarceration. When they can get you locked up in a bed, they can make money off of that. And so the job of the police is to escort you into a cell. And trust me, the government would like for them to politely escort you. Sometimes we give them so much static, they're so wound tight that they skid off the road. But trust me, it's like there's this myth out here, the fake news myth, and people writing these stories like, oh, the government, the state is killing black men, and that's by design. No, the state is incarcerating people of color by design because that's profitable. The killing is something the government is completely against. It tries to do everything in its power to stop, and that's why this whole they're protesting for something the government actually is already trying its hardest to do: prevent the police from brutalizing and or killing the people that they want escorted politely into jail so they can make money off of them.
That's that
Private prisons don't make money off of corpses. They make money off of live bodies that can sit in a cell.
For the next 25 to 30.
And so the whole Black Lives Matter movement was Trump's campaign management. That's all that was. And it's, Jim said something about playing chess. It's a game of chess. Mm-hmm. And that a lot of times the loudest voices are the people that play checkers. Because they don't know a damn thing about chess. And they don't even know that we're in a chess match. They think we're playing checkers. And the people that, the evil white man, he's playing chess. I'm sorry. And you're playing a game of checkers and you wonder why we keep getting our ass beat. So now y'all got me cussing.
Well, we'll allow a little bit of that, man, because when I was in other universities, man, that's all I did was cuss, So
yeah, that's the first time I've been with you for an hour where you haven't used the N-word. Literally, fingernails on a chalkboard. N-word this, N-word that. I got to come on your podcast to hear you not use the N-word.
It's trying to be real professional.
Okay.
Aunt Myrtle is watching.
Oh, Lord. May bless her, man. Look here. This has been everything I could ask for it to be. And this show, Jason, is rooted in models of possibility and best practices. And I couldn't have done any better tonight by having Wendell Stemley, Brother Philip Laury out of Chicago, the great Jim Brown, and the incomparable Jason Whitlock in studio with us, man. And it just means more than I can put in words. And I usually, do a pretty good deal with words. But I'm speechless to know that you was able to come over here, man, and demonstrate who you really are, man. And I will forever be thankful that you did, man.
No problem, Bobby.
Just meeting you, Jason, tonight was one of the most pleasant surprises that I've experienced in a long time, because you showed me another part of you that I didn't know existed, because all I've ever seen you is on Fox TV but once you got off of that, once you got off into the journalism part of your life, man, it became quite intriguingly interesting. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I just got the cue from Lady Porters that we ain't got to go home, but we got to get on out of here. So, thank you for letting me be myself
again.
Get on up like a sex machine. Get on up.